condition than the before.
Okay.
Yeah. The condition than the before.
Okay.
Now, I think we can start. Before starting, I apologize for the audience that there are some technical issues related with the live presentation. But now, I'm proud to open this interestingly and let's say a very exciting joint meeting of Middle East Fertility Society and Turkish Society of Embryology. This is mainly related with the status of let's say the clinical embryologist, the global perspective, and we discussed these matters with this distinguished faculty. The faculty's characteristic is they're really high experienced and leading scientists in their areas, and they are contributing to us from the different parts of the world, from India, from United Kingdom, from United States, Jordan, Qatar, Slovenia, and so it's a very fruitful and good night for us, for everyone who can listen and who can see, who can watch this meeting. Before starting, I want to share a short opinion of mine about the clinical embryology. As far as I'm a clinician, I'm OBGYN, professor of OBGYN, but I worked in this field more than 30 years. And in the first 10 to 12 years, I worked as a clinical embryologist also in the lab. And even 25 years ago, I managed to have a daughter with this, both on the lab side and the clinical side. And this daughter is now in the Oxford for clinical embryology master. So it's a kind of, for me, as a unique position, both patient, both physician, both embryologist and a father. So it's an area for me, it's a fantastic area. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a very prestigious job to be done in every part of the world. But don't forget that the pioneers in this area have a lot of struggles to apply their job. You know, we all know that there are two people in the beginning, the Bob Edwards and Patrick Steptoe. But we don't know the third person, the Jane Purdy. She was a nurse actually, but worked as an embryologist, and she was with Bob Edwards at that time, and Bernhol recognized her 30 years later. And this field is an interesting area. There are a lot of things. And as a physiologist, Bob Edwards, as a nurse, Jane Purdy, and as an OBGYN endoscopist, Patrick Steptoe, three of them are the pioneers of this field. So while we are defining the boundaries of this clinical embryology area, we should be open-minded. We should give importance to diversity of different scientific areas, and we shouldn't limit the people to work and make some scientific contributions to this perfect and wonderful scientific area. I find it as a pure science. So I want to stop my talk, and my co-chairs will present the speakers to you, and then we directly pass to the panel. Yes, Halil, you may present, and also Nagam Yunus with us as a co-chair. They will present the speakers, and we will listen, I think, very good presentations.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's hard to say anything on top of that. I mean, you explained it with great examples, saying that our field is multidisciplinary, and there are incomes and inputs that are coming from all the scientific fields to our clinical embryology field. So I also like to apologize for the technical delay. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Professor Borut Kovacic. I'm sure everybody knows him very well, but just out of courtesy, I'd like to introduce him very shortly. He's the head of IVF lab at the University of Maribor. He also holds a teaching position at the same university and at the cell biology department at the same university. He obtained his PhD from University of Ljubljana, and he is an extremely active member of ESHRE, having served in every stages of the society. So, Professor Borut, the virtual stage is yours. We're looking forward for your presentation. Thank you very much.
So thank you, organizers, for your kind invitation to this very interesting topic. I think there will be a live discussion, but let's see now. I think that we have possibility now to. Do you see now the screen?
Yes, the screen is all good, Professor. The stage is yours.
Okay, so just for the introduction of this interesting meeting, just a couple of words from European perspective, or maybe better said from ESHRE perspective, because we try to do a lot of things within the European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. And let's maybe just for an introduction, a couple of words about the status and evolution of clinical embryology. I have to say that I have been in ESHRE steering committee for embryology certification for almost 12 years. Now I am the coordinator of ESHRE steering committee for embryologist training accreditation, and I will also talk about these two certification programs. So first, what does it mean to be clinical embryologist and to work in a healthcare system? To be honest, when we finished our study, we are not prepared to work in a healthcare system. And I think that this is something that can cause a problem, not only in our society, but also in the other societies in a healthcare system that cannot completely understand how we were able to enter the system without any basic study regarding the medicine. So first, we should be familiar with strict rules and responsibilities, and in fact, they let us know in every step that this is very important, and we should understand also the hierarchy of health professionals regarding the positions, responsibilities, different educational levels, especially specialization and so on. And at the end, we are informed that we should be subjected to a long theoretical and practical training that we can work autonomously. And when we start work, we have a lot of expectations. First, we expect that there will be a prescribed training program and that we will have our own tutor. So daily scheduled training program and stepwise involvement in all laboratory procedures, and that our level of competencies will be defined all the time. Also that we will upgrade our knowledge and skills regularly, and to get opportunity to progress up the hierarchy of the health system. After a couple of years working in IVF lab, we really recognize that our work is connected with a high level of responsibility. And in fact, we ensure strict, if not the strictest standards of safety, quality, and compliance with different regulations and quality standards. In the European Union, these are very well-known tissue and cell directives that are becoming more and more strict. And we are now waiting for a revision of previous directives. Finally, we recognize that our contribution is practically equal to the success of infertility treatment compared to doctors. And in many cases, we are not duty, but we have to work outside standard working hours. And finally, often our status is not recognized despite of direct involvement in different therapeutical processes. I have to cite here a very interesting study that was conducted by Alex Varghese, and it was presented as a poster 2 years before in ESHRE annual meeting, where in a large questionnaire, he analyzed 4 open-ended questions that were related with the question, what embryologist thinks the major problem faced at clinics, at professional level, at personal level, and the last question, what is your career goal? So as we can see in this presentation, there are mostly these red asters from the wheels are connected with the negative connotations, and embryologists, which are essential professionals, are less satisfied in many quantifiable aspects regarding education, recognition, remuneration, compensation, and so on. But on the last wheel, we can see that when we ask them about their career goal, they have very positive opinion, and they're the same topics that they believe they will reach during their career. So in many cases, if they don't reach these goals, they ask themselves, who in fact are we in the health system? And there is always a question, why don't embryologists have a professional status yet? There are a couple of possible reasons. We shared a lot of these questions among our colleagues within ESHRE, and we came to the conclusion of possible reasons. Like one of them is that we are trapped in the staffing norms of the early IVF era, where only technicians were allowed to work in the lab as assistant to clinicians that have been pioneers in that field. Then we became scientists, and now we are, in fact, we are doing routine clinical work. Another reason is that there are undergraduate education that is outside formal education of the health system. So in fact, we are non-health workers, or at least health co-workers, but not health workers. And there is informal forms of education in clinical embryology in most of the countries. There is also the absence of a universally recognized training program with standards that are equivalent to education for other health workers. Very rigid health system in accepting interdisciplinarity, and the lack of support from national professional boards that are responsible for education in the medicine. Also, in many cases, no legal basis for classifying this profile as a health professional, and some also rationality reasons, because if we don't have appropriate status, then we represented a very cheap working force. But let's see also the evolution of staff needs in IVF labs. As mentioned, we started as lab technicians. This is my logbook. I started 33 years ago, and you can see very simple logbook with most of topics about the cleaning and washing. The most demanding part of my my tasks was a mouse embryo assay. Then later, we became scientists because it was a lot of new techniques, methodologies that have to be developed in our own laboratories, and it was needed to read a lot of papers. Unfortunately, there are today many scientific journals related to clinical embryology, but from the beginning it was really, really difficult. And once all these methods are quite well established, we now work very routine work, and we can say we became clinical embryologists because we are directly involved in a clinical part, therapeutic part of infertility treatment. But let's see what are possibilities for organized education in clinical embryology. There are many e-learning programs, different master courses, hands-on courses. There are also possibilities for some laboratories that have apprenticeship, which is covered by the government. It is very recommended to visit other IVF laboratories and to learning from experienced embryologists, but they're all informal forms of education. And there are many papers that have been published from different societies, not only from ESHRE, also from ALPHA, also from American Society, that there is a need for organized education in clinical embryology. It is not mentioned that this is reserved only for MDs. All societies recognized basic scientists to be involved from the beginning in clinical embryology, and they mentioned that they deserve the proper status. And why should education in clinical embryology be organized? Because we know there are a lot of responsibilities because we are involved in therapeutic process, in diagnosing male infertility. There is a high level of responsibility for working with human embryos. There are very strict standards of safety and quality, and we should keep consistency in lab services. There are also consequences arising from suboptimal laboratory performance. We should be updated with many novelties in art, and we should gain the trust of clinicians and patients. And what is needed for complete organized education? First, there should be a curriculum. This is a list of theoretical topics that should be studied. A syllabus that is different from curriculum. It is a program of practical training with the duration of training in different parts of the profession. Also the tutorial system and the logbook where the records of each single event should be written. The supervisor should be registered at the Ministry of Health, and the center where the training is performed should be accredited somehow, and the knowledge and skills should be verified by appropriate examinations. And the competence level should be maintained continuously. This is a continuing medical education, or we can say continuing professional development system. So these are a couple of points that are recognized as a prerequisite for organized education, and all medical specialists or specialization follow these points. So ESHRE tried to do something in this way. First step was establishing of a steering committee to prepare the first internationally standardized educational system for the theory, and from 2008, ESHRE started with two-level examination. There is a curriculum, prescribed literature that is updated every year, evaluation of participants' academic degrees through European institutions that validate the diplomas, a very simple logbook, or examination that is organized every year before or during annual meeting. And there is more than 2,000 clinical embryologists certified. It is now global examination that is well attended. This year it was 300 participants and more than 100 on the waiting list. So then once we started with this program, the steering committee faced with many problems regarding the understanding different situations in different European countries and now also to different world countries. And this is why we decided to make a survey. This was performed in 2014, where we first time recognized that in the Europe, there is about 7,000 laboratory staff members from 1,400 IVF clinics who are involved in infertility treatment by high-tech art procedures, resulting in birth of more than 120,000 babies yearly, and these numbers are going increasing very rapidly. So it's not such a small society, 7,000 laboratory staff working only in Europe. So predominantly there are master and PhD scientists from natural science supported by lab technicians. We recognized very disharmonized level of training and externally organized and mandatory training courses have been found only in few countries. Mostly personnel were trained to work from their experienced colleagues. The next step was the establishment of the continuing professional development credit system that is available for all certified embryologists. So you can keep records from all your activities, like attending the meetings, international, national, presenting some oral presentations, posters, writing papers, or be involved in a professional bodies. You can get credits, and it was calculated that 60 credits for clinical embryologist level and 100 credits for senior levels is needed in a 3 years block to get annual CPD diploma. We still didn't improve the status of embryologists within ESHRE, and we decided to go to UEMS. This is organization, European organization for medical specializations. And we tried to apply for the accreditation for our exam. This is SESMA, is a sub-organization within this UEMS that is responsible for accreditation of medical specialist examinations in different medical fields. So on our big surprise, they accepted to visit one of our exams. And finally, they said that it is quite difficult to see so well-organized exam around the world. So they gave us the certificate for the 5 years period, and now we are waiting for a reaccreditation of this exam. So we believe that this is somehow an improvement, and it is a recognition by the first European organization that is responsible for medical specialization. However, we are not MDs, and this was also we were informed that this is a unique situation, that they accredited the exam that is not only for MDs, but as it was recognized as a very difficult and well-organized exam, they did this exception. So by giving this certificate, we should follow the different guidelines, how to organize the exam, how to write the questions for the exam, and how to do the analysis, the quality control of the exam after the exam. So after 10 years of examination, we performed the statistics of all exams. There are specific statistical methods to show the quality of the exam. And we were quite proud because all these parameters showed of very high level exam. Then the last paper that we published is a paper where we did analysis what is about the training before this is 10 years later. We made the similar analysis and we really saw that there is a kind of improvement in the medical embryology, clinical embryology education. But in most countries still don't have any organized form of education, and it is still very heterogeneous and lack of standardizations. In some countries, there are some academic institutions involved, also medical faculties, but by offering lectures of embryology and short courses. However, these formats were recognized as not comparable to the educational standards that is required in the health sector. On the map here, we can see that on a big interest, the Nordic countries and the Central European countries have no organized education in clinical embryology. There is then also Spain, Italy, also Germany has only guidelines or recommendations how the organized education should be. And it is some guidelines are written by embryology societies. Then from Eastern Europe, it is some level of mandatory courses or some kinds of mandatory points that should embryologists follow. Only in France, they have this situation that is now also very similar in Turkey, where clinical embryology is reserved only for MDs. But in Romania, there is basically it is reserved for MDs, but also for basic scientists if they follow the PhD program in the medical faculty. The UK have a specific situation, very well-established system. This will be presented maybe later from another presenter. And the last step, we saw that we need to do something on a training program, and this is the new certification program in ESHRE with the aim to harmonize practical training and skill testing of clinical embryologists according to the prescribed standards. That is very compatible with the existing ESHRE EPCOG subspecialization program in reproductive medicine for clinicians. There are two complementary training programs at the moment available. So we would like to merge the theoretical knowledge testing with the practical skills testing within accredited training center with the mandatory CPD system. This is the main goal. And how this accreditation can be set up. First, we should define the accredited training centers. So all centers could apply, but they should contain, provide acceptable annual statistics, internal quality control, organized teaching sessions, ESHRE prescribed training of trainees, and availability of different requirements for the training. The training is of two levels, so that it is compatible with the existing theoretical knowledge. It is reserved 3 years for the basic level of training by following these 10 basic modules, and then advanced level with additional 10 modules and additional 3 years. At the end, 6 years. There is a much more complex logbooks that is prepared by the standards of different medical specialties with evaluation of laboratory and technical skills. And once the center apply for the accreditation, then there are 2 ESHRE assessors that visit the center and make interviews with the trainees and tutors. And the conclusions, embryologists have more than proven our indispensable role in ART team over 40 years of working in IVF laboratories. We act as highly professional health workers directly involved in the treatment of infertility through the use of high-tech and cell therapy. Within ESHRE, at the moment, all the conditions for the European recognition of the professional status of clinical embryologists are fulfilled. And ESHRE has turned to EBCOG, this is European Board and College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, for their support in formalizing the status of medical embryology. They advised us to use the title medical embryology because clinical is related to when you touch the patients, but medical is like to distinguish veterinary embryology with medical embryology. Then we said, okay, it's not important, just to get the status. And EBCOG has already pledged its support. They have we presented 3 times the ESHRE program to EBCOG chairs, to EBCOG council. It was then also voting, and after voting, they accepted that EBCOG has a special interest group of medical embryology within this society. This is society that is responsible for specialization in gynecology. So the problem that also they mentioned is that each European country has its own legal frameworks for the recognition of postgraduate education and work profiles in their health system. So it's quite difficult to make a rule. They can only give recommendations to national societies how to implement medical embryology as a new profession within their own national health system. So that's all from my side.
Thank you, Professor Borut, for this highly interesting and comprehensive overview of the European status of clinical embryology and clinical embryologists. So I'd like to leave the stage to Nagam. We will be asking getting the questions for the speakers and the panelists after the next speaker. So Nagam, please introduce the next speaker, please.
Nagam, the microphone is closed. Yeah.
It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Dr. Fadi Shqair from Lebanon. Who's working now as the scientific manager at Sidra Medicine in Qatar. And he is also the chair of the Embryology Special Interest Group in the Middle East Fertility Society. Fadi, the stage is yours, and can't wait to hear you.
Thank you, Nagam. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity with the whole panelists to share our experience from the Middle East. So I will share with you the results, the interim results of an exploratory survey with key informants about processes to ensure fitness to practice clinical embryology in 18 Arab countries. Nothing to disclose. Have you ever wondered about the current recognition status of embryologists in Arab countries? Well, in the next minutes, I will show you the current status and processes to ensure fitness to practice clinical embryology in 18 Arab countries. Over the past 3 decades, there has been an explosion of growth in the ART sector, with figures from the UK showing that the number of cycles in 2019 were 7 times higher than they were in 1991. In keeping with this trend, the total number of IVF cycles in the US has steadily grown every consecutive year. The number of IVF clinics and fertility services have also expanded at an unprecedented rate. At the same time, clinical embryology has undergone remarkable advancements. These developments in both practice and education have been driven together by science and technology. Therefore, embryologist skills and competencies had been refined. In this regard, we previously proposed a model of 7 roles of embryologists, away from the technical part, the technical role in the lab. Recent studies have witnessed a substantial increase in the complexity and time requirement of contemporary IVF cycles. Consequently, more embryologists are needed to provide quality care. It is therefore anticipated that the demand for the clinical embryologist workforce will increase. In regard to staffing, the ASRM's updated 2022 guidelines recommend an additional staff member in comparison to their 2008 guidelines. While the number of IVF cycles and embryologists are increasing globally, there is considerable variation in the level of embryologists' professionalism, which includes technical skills, scientific competence, and ethical conduct. Meanwhile, concerns are raised about insufficient attention to minimum professional standards of education and licensing, thereby threatening the professionalism of embryologists. Systemic issues underlying this variation are the lack of uniform qualifications and experience requirements at the job level. Only one study, the study of Dr. Burrid, surveyed in 2013 the educational and professional status of clinical embryology and clinical embryologists in Europe. Unexpectedly, no uniform European qualifications and experience requirements for clinical embryologists have been identified. A subsequent examination conducted a decade later in European countries revealed a notable increase of 35.5% compared to the previously collected data. Another significant contribution to this variation in the level of professionalism is the explosion of degrees and training, and some of which have low teaching or scientific standards. Research on the professional regulation of embryologists' workforce is severely lacking. Basically, professional regulation has 3 main purposes. The first is to ensure that minimally acceptable standards of care competence are being provided. The second is to provide accountability and reassure patients that professionals are deserving of trust. And the third is to improve quality of care by providing guidance about best practice. In this perspective, licensing is a compulsory process of assessment of healthcare workers as fit to practice. So according to one report, clinical embryologist regulation vary widely or even are absent across European countries. And how does the situation look outside of Europe? Therefore, we aimed in this study to examine particularly the professional standards and practices of embryologists across 18 Arab countries at the full professional development continuum from education and training to licensing and relicensing. A descriptive cross-sectional study was conducted between October and November 2022. The questionnaire was designed by self-completion by key informant embryologists in 18 Arab member states. A purposeful selection of key informants was undertaken to maximize the sampling of experts. Key informants in each partner country were identified through the personal knowledge of project team members and snowballing techniques. These participants were permanent public and private-based IVF laboratory directors with a recent work practice in the same country. The project was exempt from IRB. The executive team of the Middle East Fertility Society Embryology Special Interest Group assisted with the design of a questionnaire that covered a range of issues related to regulations of embryologists, professional standards, and practice. A review of peer-reviewed and gray literature supplemented the questionnaire findings. The key informants of our study are experienced embryologists with a range experience between a 4 and an 18-year tenure. Due to the fact that participants are answering questions about the national status of embryologists, the number of key informants is limited. Our analysis showed that 10 countries out of 18 Arab countries have established regulatory system and quite similar licensing requirements for clinical embryologists. With a minimum of bachelor degree from of basic science and a minimum of 2-year experience and an interview assessment. According to our findings, most of those licensing systems were located in the GCC, the Gulf countries. There can be contextual factors that influence the development of explicit regulatory system. Structural factors that are connected to national laws, not guidelines, for regulating allied healthcare workers and the practice of ART, as well as public sector investments in healthcare. The establishment of regulatory system may also be influenced by socioeconomic factors. For instance, the heavy reliance on a diverse expat workforce. Additionally, the growing economy attracts a large population of immigrants. In the GCC, health services are provided free of charge for all residents, and private sectors participation has been encouraged as part of reforms. A solid regulatory system is therefore necessary both in the public and private sectors to deliver high-quality services. Also, delivering high-quality services reduces government funding for overseas treatment. Most countries, however, use an interview-based assessment method in addition to the minimum requirement. In terms of interpersonal competence, it is a valuable method, but we suggest that assessment should be based on objective measures with scores. Based on our analysis of some implicit regulatory systems related to local educational programs, we observed that 50% of countries have local training programs that are mainly in-house, and 30% have local certificates or diplomas. It is important to note that among the 10 states, only 3 have established local embryologist associations. According to our analysis, the remaining 8 Arab countries are lacking a clinical embryology licensing system. Despite the absence of regulation, the competitive market imposed minimum requirement for job entry, namely a bachelor degree and technical expertise. In addition, there was a predominance of local training and educational programs in those countries. A possible explanation is that regulated countries, such as the GCC, rely heavily on experienced and trained workers. Taking a look at the migration of experienced embryologists between countries in the future will be of interest. It is important to note that among the 8 states, only 2 have local embryologist associations. In sum, our analysis found variations in regulations among 18 Arab countries relating to fitness to practice clinical embryology. Furthermore, in our analysis, we attempted to calculate the international level of agreement between key informants. The findings reveal a lack of knowledge among experienced embryologists regarding the local status of the profession. The data were verified with national reviewers and triangulated with other data sources to overcome these inconsistencies. The paucity of local embryologist associations drives attention not only to policymakers and regulatory bodies, but also to us embryologists. A greater effort is needed from embryologists at first. While clinical embryology is not formally recognized in 8 Arab countries, there are fewer certified embryologists in those countries. Although our comparative analysis of regulation and guidelines yielded some important insights, we acknowledge limitations of our study. One limitation is the fact that not all of the key informants were board or council members or had first-hand knowledge of policies and regulations. Moreover, embryologists with long tenure are likely to overlook information about initial licensing. Language barriers such as those in countries where English is not a second language may pose also a limitation. To conclude or not to conclude, embryologists hold a position of power as pillars for success. The professionalism of embryologists and the measures put in place by relevant authorities to ensure that professionalism are therefore paramount. Despite the fact that there is no gold standard model for practice regulation, examining the controls that are used in different countries can reveal gaps and regulatory approaches that have been employed in order to address challenges. It is apparent from our study that systems to assess the fitness of embryologists are inconsistent or non-existent in Arab countries. Also, embryologists themselves lack a clear understanding of their profession's local status. Hence, collaborative efforts are needed to address these national and regional challenges. Lastly, we emphasize the need for future interview-based research that include regulatory authorities and policymakers. The findings will serve as foundation for regulators, national associations, and embryologists. There are also ongoing challenges in trying to coordinate between regional and national associations or a group of embryologists, and more work is needed in this area. I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge all the team members who took part in this work. And over the past 3 years, the Middle East Fertility Society conducted many projects which has expanded, and the future projects to support embryologists are just beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi, for this informative and insightful talk about the status of embryology and embryologists in the Middle East. I will give the mic now to our panelists.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Fadi. That was extremely insightful, especially the end, which is not the end, the beginning. I find your topic, your talk extremely interesting. I also didn't really realize that I didn't know much about the Middle Eastern status of clinical embryologists. And as of Europe, there are a lot of heterogeneity found in the region as well, such as in Turkey. I believe that our field should be a multidisciplinary field where everybody gets to put something on the table coming from their field, coming from clinical microbiology, genetics, clinical embryology, etc., etc. So can I take the opportunity to start the discussion by asking Borut a very quick question? You explained some possible reasons why clinical embryology is not defined as a profession, let's say, per se. As a professional in this field and as who has been extremely active in the regulatory bodies, both in your country and in Europe as well, through ESHRE, what can be done from our side, from societies, and also as embryologists, as Fadi also outlined that we are lacking our contribution to our field as well in terms of legislative status. What is your projection in the future in this aspect? What can be done to overcome this problem?
So, thank you, Khalil, for this question. Yeah, I think there is not a very simple answer to this
I
question.
know.
We try to do everything within ESHRE, but you should know that ESHRE is not an umbrella of national societies, embryology societies, or gynecology societies. It is a scientific society with some elements of professional society, like writing guidelines. This certification is something that is given from ESHRE, and it is up to national society to accept or not accept. You should also know that in European Union, it is so that European Union has some legislation that has to be unique for all European Union countries. But health system is something that is in hands of specific national legislation and national health system. So maybe the right way, as we thought it is to inform the appropriate organization, like we found EPCOG, gynecologist organization for specialization in gynecology and obstetrics, because we work in close collaboration with gynecologists, and I think we will always work together with them. So we need their support, not to separate from them, but we will be split, we will be merged with them all the time. So we need their support. It is up to them to be more actively involved in national organizations, for example, where they can inform the relevant authorities that are responsible for the organized education in the health system, and to establish some such a system in their own countries. We try to do that in Slovenia. We are now just before the accepting the specialization in medical embryology, but unfortunately we have national legislation that allows specialization also for non-MDs. It is a specialization for biochemists, specialization for psychologists, for logopeds, laboratory geneticists, and now this will be I hope so, the fifth specialization from medical embryology. But we used all ESHRE documents, curriculum, and the syllabus with the permission of ESHRE. We asked for the permission to use that on a national level, but we promised that we will accredit our two university medical centers within ESHRE as training centers. Maybe it is easier in Slovenia because we have IVF only in public centers. And also it is a small country with two university medical centers. That is much easier than in other parts of Europe, where you have more than 70% of private IVF centers and less than 30% of public centers connected somehow with academic institutions. So I think the simple answer is follow the international standards regarding the organization or organized education, and see on a national level if there is existing regulation that can help somehow, or try to modify the existing regulation in the health system by pushing the relevant authorities and to do some changes in that way.
There are some questions from the audience, but before passing this section, I want to learn the thoughts or the comments of the Amy, because the United Kingdom, as far as you know, the first legislation as an act 1990, and after that they have a great organization with HFEA. So what's her opinion about our field, that the clinical embryologist who is the clinical embryologist, and also with this context, she may answer one of the questions of the audience that Kerem from the Turkish Society of Clinical Embryology, what should be the minimum higher education degree requirement to accept it for training and then practice in clinical embryology? That's Amy, we are listening to you.
Thank you. Really interesting talks from across the world. It's really amazing to see how things are done differently and how far we've come and how far we've got to go. In the UK, we are really lucky. We've had a training program set up from kind of the early 90s, if not earlier, endorsed by government bodies like the HFEA. And we have had an association of clinical embryologists from very early on as well. So we've been very lucky to have a really robust training program that has developed now into a really structured process for people who want to be embryologists, letting them train all the way from a kind of BSc level, so a Bachelor of Science level, entry university degree, all the way through to what we would call a higher specialist scientific training program, which is essentially a doctorate level. And that's all really structured, government-led, Department of Health and the HFEA involved. So to do that training program now, you could enter in practitioner level, which is called the PTP, practitioner training program, and that is basically a 3-year program where you would come out the end of it with a degree, a scientific degree, so a Bachelor of Science. And you'd also be competent in basic procedures like egg collections, sperm prep, diagnostic semen analysis, things like that. And then you would be ready to embark on the scientific training program, which would be to be a clinical embryologist, something that we would call state registered Healthcare Professions Council registered embryologist. That takes another 3 years and you have a Masters of Science at the end of that. And then you would go on to the HSST, which is the Higher Scientific Specialist Training Program, and that takes around 5 to 6 years. And at the end of it, you'd have a doctorate. So we've got a really clear pathway in the UK that has developed over the last kind of 5 to 10 years significantly. It has changed significantly, but we're very lucky that we have very high caliber students at the end of it. So I feel very, very privileged, and like all the work is done in the UK.
Very good. So, don't you have any shortage of the staff shortage, because it's a very long way to go, and even as far as I understand, they also have a basic science degree from another faculty, and then at least has 6 years to become a practicing embryologist. Is that right? I understand correctly?
Well, if you have a Bachelor of Science already, then you can just go straight into the STP, the Scientific Training Program. So then it's only 3 years that you would need to do to become an embryologist.
I understand. You have an also undergraduate.
Yeah. So if you're coming straight out,
this is very good. This is very good.
Education before that. Yeah, it is very good. And there are alternative routes as well in the UK. So you could have someone who's been working with you as a practitioner for 6 years and is basically doing everything that an embryologist would do. We've got a program where you can kind of collate evidence and a portfolio with theory and practical aspects and submit that to the same professional body, and they will review that. You'll be asked for an interview, and then you can gain the same kind of qualification as the STP. So I think for me, in answer to the question about what the minimum requirements would be for training an embryologist, I think you needed to have done an undergraduate degree, and then you would do the STP to do a master's. I don't believe that an embryologist needs to have a master's or a PhD. I think that an undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree is sufficient. But if they were doing the PTP, which is the step before, they'd be coming straight out of what we have A-levels. So when you're kind of 17, 18, you're doing A-level qualifications. You could then go into the PTP, and that would be comfortable for us.
Thank you very much.
Amy, can I quickly add something, ask for your comment on this? I myself is educated from UK as well, so I'm quite familiar with the routes to become an embryologist. Over there, it's highly competitive, as I know, as I recall and remember. So my question is that, as you described, there are different levels of being described as an embryologist. So what is the requirement to become a lab director in UK? How do you define the directory levels, and what are the requirements, minimum requirements for that?
So for the UK at the minute, it is largely based on experience. You don't need to have a doctorate to be a lab director. But what we have had in only the last couple of years, it might have been about 18 months ago, our professional body, ARCS, the Association of Reproductive and Clinical Scientists, have published a paper that indicates anyone who is a lab director should have what we would call the Fellowship of the Royal College of Pathologists. So this is like the RCOG in the UK, but it's the Royal College of Pathologists instead. So once you've become a fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists, you're basically seen as you have parity with your clinical colleagues. So someone who's practicing as an MD, you'd be seen as equal to them. You'd be classed as a consultant, a clinical embryologist, and that is what our professional body would say is the required standard for a lab director. Ultimately, that's going to be really difficult to achieve because at the moment there's maybe 11 or 12 of us in the UK who have that qualification. It's not something that is regularly done. There are more and more happening every year, but certainly we have, over 100 lab directors, and not all of them have got that qualification. So at the minute, the minimum requirement is years of experience and being HCPC registered. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. And there is another question from Karim for Dr. Shehan. What about the status in USA?
Yes, I would first like to thank Boris and Fadi for their excellent talks, and it's been very helpful for me to understand the situation both in Europe and in Arabic countries and Middle Eastern countries. So the situation in the United States is actually clear. The certification for being a clinical embryologist requires some certain, you need to have enough biology, chemistry credits to become a technician. And you can be a technician in laboratory testing as well as in embryology. And a bachelor's degree and 4 years of experience may lead you to become a technical supervisor in the laboratory. Having a master's degree and 2 years of experience may lead to becoming a technical supervisor in the laboratory. And also for a doctorate level, PhD level scientist who has, or an MD, yes, of course, they are not interested in being technical supervisor, but a PhD become in 1 year a technical supervisor in a laboratory setting. When we look at the laboratory director, as Amy explained a minute earlier, in Britain, in United States, you need to be an MD or a PhD level to become a lab director. And of course, there's an accreditation or certification process required to become a laboratory director. There is a non-profit organization called American Society of American Association of bio.
Bioanalysts.
Yes, and this organization, AAB and ABB, are the bodies who allow us to take some examination and become laboratory directors. These laboratory directors are not only assigned for clinical embryology laboratories, but you can be a part of, except pathology laboratories, you can become a laboratory director in many other disciplines, as long as you have the enough years of experience yourself or a technical supervisor under you having the enough years of experience. So this is the way it works. And I certainly, Amy explained the situation in United Kingdom, and looking into that, I would like to ask Barut, there's in Europe, especially in United Kingdom, there's a very straightforward and already structured training for embryologists and the laboratory directors, as far as I can see. Why can't Europe can inherit that kind of experience to themselves direct? What are the restrictions about this?
So the program, the training program, the new training program is now available on the ESHRE webpage. We sit together with the specialists that are organized also the training program for reproductive medicine subspecialists, and also learned a lot from the UK system. So we have also a member, Brian Woodward from the UK, who also helped us. And at the moment, we have 15 assessors of the training program, just trained in a training. There are also there are assessors from different parts of Europe, equally distributed from northern, southern, western, eastern part. So the program is structured and it is available for the basic level. So you can, if you follow the basic training program by these 10 modules, I think you can successfully be trained for the basic embryologist or lab technicians working in an embryology lab, doesn't matter. This can be used for different levels depending on the national health system. But regarding the head of laboratory, there is a system of 10 modules that are more focused on the quality control, the statistics, annual statistics, KPIs, also the managing of the cryobank laboratories, education of other staff members, verifying the competency levels of people, and so on. It's something that is well related with the European Union tissue and cell directives as well. So this is, we decided to do two-level system because this is an existing two-level system from the theoretical knowledge.
I see. Yeah. Thank you very much. So another simple, maybe a complicated, but a question. For example, it's actually the most important indicator for the education levels all across to Europe or in the world, can easily be measured by the clinical success rates. And then the registries are extremely important under these circumstances. So, as you are saying, quality control and the data part is your primary target at the moment to implement so that you can bring standards. So are you planning to put a registry all across Europe or something like that that's going to bring things together?
This is, the ESHRE just gained the European project for organizing the European Union registry on IVF.
Yes.
It is a huge project. I'm also involved in this project. And we believe that this will be connected with the data that need to be reported about the number of cells, tissues collected, processed, stored, distributed, and so on, but also with the basic success rates like not only pregnancy rates, live birth rates, but also something related to laboratory, like fertilization rate.
KPIs.
This is a huge, it can be a huge program, but it is still not well decided if we will go in such a large demanding registry with all these data, or it will be like from different parts, so that someone who wants to collect all data for the authorities about the cells and tissues can fill that part. Another one who wants to calculate its own KPIs can fill that part, and then the basic part that is needed for looking the trends within the European Union countries. But as you know, in European regulation, every tissue establishment and MAR centers should have the quality control system established. So the authorities usually check how we calculate not the success rate. They never ask for the pregnancy rate, but they want to see how we measure the success, the quality. So they're not competent to measure to look the clinical pregnancy rate, because there are more or less pharmacists in these authorities.
I see. Yeah.
Before passing to one of the questions from the audience, I want to hear the opinions of vet from India, that he told me before beginning this meeting that actually there are recent changes in some regulations. Would you please give some comments about the situation in India,
sure.
and your thoughts about the future prospects of the who should be the clinical embryologists in the India, and what should be the at least the standards of these embryologists in the India?
First of all, thank you so much for that inviting me for this wonderful meeting, and it was wonderful talk from Fadi and Dr. Boro. And as far as concerned about clinical embryology status in India, as I told you in the beginning, that recently in June 22, we have implemented the rules and regulations in India. So earlier it was anybody can do the IVF, embryologist, he can become the embryologist. Now it is totally postgraduate person can do the embryology. No graduate scientist, no other than life sciences and the clinical embryologist degree should have to practice the clinical embryology in India. So with that, if you have done postgraduate in clinical embryology, you have to spend at least 4 years in lab, then you can do the practice as an embryologist, not before that. And for PhD, on-site training should be there for at least 1 year, then he can become the embryologist. And for medical graduate, it should be always 3 years now. So it is totally changed now. So I think earlier it was not like that, and people are in India now they are arranging in-house embryologist also. Earlier it was not like that. Most of the time the freelancer are coming and they are doing batches in lab, but now in-house embryologists are there, so they have to do all the things. And other than that, there is no such formal education earlier. Now there are university, they are running such kind of master degree in clinical embryology. So now it is improving, and maybe in future we will be able to match other countries also, like UK and Europe countries.
Thank you very much. There is a question from one of my clinical colleague, OBGYN specialist, but he is also running a private center. And maybe Barut may answer this. He said that, are there any straightforward recommendations from the panelists in order to set a roadmap for amendment the recently introduced regulation. Let me give a brief before the answer of Barut. There is a recent more than two legislation has passed, and this is now in the court. Unfortunately, these legislations. Before that, as you have mentioned in your last manuscript in human reproduction, the PhD is necessary, or MD is necessary for being a lab director in Turkey. But this PhD is not a real PhD, I think. There is a missing data over there. The PhD should be done in a particular science division in histology and embryology. They are not, let's say, accepting the PhD in, let's say, genetics or reproductive genetics, or let's say in reproductive immunology, or let's say reproductive microbiology. But they should, you should have to have a PhD in the in that particular area. And unfortunately, these people decided not to accept anybody than medical doctors to their PhD programs. So this is a place that you limit and you close all the doors. Even the medical doctors, but if you are only a practitioner, MD, you have to get the in the previous legislation, you have to go and had a PhD plus PhD on MD, or to the residency program in histology and embryology. So this is the main hot core topic in Turkey. We are, of course, not accepting such kind of regulations. We are trying to open the area to other doctorate programs, and also this kind of legislation is lack of the experience item. As mentioned by Amy, that there's at least several years necessary for becoming a lab director, not a PhD, but you have to have an experience to become a lab director. You may have a PhD degree, but you may not have any experience in the lab. So in this context, would you please make some comments after my explanation and this the question?
Yeah, very shortly, I think we should not do any program for the health system without inviting medical faculty or some medical authorities, so we cannot do anything without them. This is one thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting that clinical embryology has not been interesting branch of sub-branch of medicine for any of existing medical specialty. We were existing for more than 40 years. But now you can see that it is, when we presented what we have, what we achieved within ESHRE, we detected the interest from the section of laboratory medicine, then the section from pathology and histology and embryology. Yeah, this is why we decided then to be closely connected with the gynecologists, because in fact we work together. There are many gynecologists working also in the laboratory as clinical embryologists. But histology and embryology, we know that this is a section that exists within medical curricula. Yeah, they feel somehow, because of the name, that they are responsible for the embryology. So my suggestion would be just to make negotiations with the people from these different authorities and try to explain the situation, present the syllabus that is very specific for our field. This is, if you look the ESHRE curriculum and ESHRE syllabus, it is very complex one, the long one where we try to describe everything just to show that this is very, very specific field, and it is not just a part of laboratory medicine where you can work the analysis of different body fluids and perform some tests and so on. It is manual working with human gametes, creating human embryos and so on. So it's quite important to present, as it was presented from other speakers as well, the authorities that are responsible for this organized education are not very well informed about the details about from medical embryology. What does it mean? How this can be trained? I cannot imagine to be involved in any medical program in medical faculty, for example, but not working in IVF lab at the same time. How can you finish the education, theoretical education, but not to work practically in the lab? So you must work practically and gain some certificate during your work.
Thank you. So, Halil, you may have some comments on that, and you may have some questions. Also, we may hear the opinions about this situation and others from Fadi and Nakam.
Yes, yes. I cannot agree more with Borut. I mean, and also on top of that, I think there's a clear line between defining two different fields. I think this will make a huge difference. I think medical embryology and clinical embryology is hugely different between themselves. Medical embryology is let's say, maybe to simplify it, we can actually identify it in different regions in the world as developmental biology, the medical embryology part. But clinical embryology is completely different. As Borut is outlined, it has to be, you have to spend time, years in time, in the lab to become competent in clinical embryology. And I'd like to direct this question to Cihan Halıcıgil, actually, having trained in Turkey and currently performing his science in US at Yale University. Can you comment on the difference between clinical embryology and medical embryology?
Yeah, I totally agree with you with the fact that developmental biology is the most important field. It's going to shape the future of especially IVF going forward. But clinical embryologists or the clinical work in IVF is not directly related. Of course, it bears a similar kind skill sets in particular fields, but clinical embryology is more about standards and patient satisfaction and success rates, and it's not about the research part of the scientific part of the project. It's actually the scientific part which is being currently developing in an exceptional velocity at this point. You cannot bring those kind of experimental things into a clinical setting unless it's been found to be secure. And looking at that, as an embryologist who moved, I am coming from a biology origin as a bachelor, and then I had my biotechnology PhD, and I also had a second master's degree in clinical embryology as well. I do really appreciate ESHRE's efforts to bring the standards, and I believe that it's very important. Looking at the solution of this problem, chicken, egg, and egg and chicken problem, I believe we have to set the standards for the educators and the teachers first. And then we need to establish a team of the people who are going to give these trainings all across the Europe or the world. After that, I believe that these people will able to bring more standards in the education. Of course, the fundamentals bringing standards to the fundamentals is very important. There should be a fundamental issue which we need to decide who can become an embryologist, a clinical embryologist or not. But I think setting the standards for the people who are going to educate these clinical embryologists is far more important at this point as well. So.
Yes, Fadi, I think you want to say something.
Go ahead. Borit, go ahead. You raise your hand.
Yeah, I can completely agree with these required standards for the tutors, and this is why ESHRE also established a tutorial system where there are requirements for tutors very well described. So since you know that we have now the examination, ESHRE examination for more than 10 years, and there are many certified embryologists, we have one of these requirements is that the tutor has acquired the ESHRE certificate. I cannot remember now if for senior embryologist or for any certificate from ESHRE. This is one of the requirements. Then it is also, I think, 10 years working in the lab, IVF lab. And then it is up to visitors who visit the center where the training is performed. The visitor then assess the training program, also look if there is any possibility for scientific work, the quality control system established, seminars organized, and so on. It is separate interview with trainees and with tutors. So it is exactly the same system that exists for the for other specialist accreditation in any other European medical specialist program.
So I have some points to comment. First, I agree with you, like medical laboratory is different to clinical embryology because like in medical lab, it's a point of care analytical laboratory to analyze specimens. So it's different than the whole system and the environment, it's different in the lab. So even managing the lab is different. There are different components that they are not similar to analytical lab. That's one. Another point, I agree with you guys for mentorship, and I suggest the role of professional societies to develop like role modeling workshops and toolkits for senior embryologists and for seniors to teach their peers and junior embryologists, like a role modeling toolkit or a workshop to help them. So I think also it's not only the regulatory, there is also an important contribution from us. Embryologists, they need like to do local associations by lobbying, do like a force to showcase their role, to demonstrate what's the importance of their role. And the last point, also to standardize the technical training in other medical specialty, they have like trusted education management platforms. For example, for fellows, they have myevaluations.com to have like a place where you put all your technical skills, your experience. So there should be like something unified, regional or international. That's the ideal.
Yes, Barut.
Still about the differences between the terms medical and clinical embryology, we were very confused from the beginning when this suggestion came from the EPCOG side. But then, okay, we said maybe it's, for us, it's not very important what is the name. It is important to get the status, the real status. One of the suggestions also that came from our side is to make like to distinguish developmental embryology from reproductive embryology. But nobody wanted to leave the title clinical or medical, because this is related with the medicine, you know. So at the moment, I think it is not still very fixed or very sure what title of the profession and what title of professionals will be used in the future. I think clinical embryologist is well accepted around the globe. So we would like to keep clinical embryologist if possible. But I know that I participated one of this meeting of the UEMS, this European organization where the different specialties have representatives, and they have voting about the new examination, new specialties, subspecialties. They are very sensitive on the titles, on the terms, looking back in the history, who developed what, and so on. It's quite complicated. So I think we at least in ESHRE, we try to follow the suggestion from the people who are involved in the UEMS to see what will be the best for our profession. But I cannot say that this is the last decision about medical embryology. So let's wait what will be the final decision.
Thank you, Borat, for your thoughts and for all the informative facts that you are providing us with. But I believe that we are facing a shortage in embryologists all over the world. Pretty sure in North America, we have this critical shortage. I believe in the Middle East, we have a shortage of well-experienced embryologists as well. So it's a general question for all. Like, what do you think the main reason for this severe shortage of embryologists? Is it the nature of the profession, like it's very stressful, it's very time and effort consuming, or it is the laws and all these complications that we start to face nowadays with the certification, with the licensure? So what do you think?
What we can see in Europe is that the embryologists migrate a lot between, not only between IVF centers, but also between countries, looking for the better working conditions and probably the higher salary and the better status, if possible. But some of them look working in different embryology lab, like adventures to and opportunities to go to different interesting countries, especially when they still don't have a family and they want to explore different countries, merging together with the working places. So this is very well known. I don't see the lack of embryology in European countries. There are always possible to find people. One thing is that there are many new MAR centers that are appearing in specific countries, and the people are looking for non-educated or non-trained basic scientists, but they are very quickly trained by sending them to another laboratory just to get the very quick training from the colleagues from another centers. That is also possible. And I know one of the comments from the editor when we published this paper was, okay, so it is understandable the issue that you presented, but looking around the Europe, we can say that also if the system is not well established, the system is working the educational system is not established in European countries, the medical or clinical embryology is working quite well. we have to be honest that this is also the way how to work. But I think that if we follow the safety and quality standards, and all medicine try to follow these standards, then we should also make the education according to these standards.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Fadi. Yeah. Thank you.
Nagam, just to comment on the point, I believe mostly the shortage of the workforce, mainly healthcare workers, was mostly observed in North America after COVID crisis. That was an observation. The cause, maybe you guys from the US, you can.
Yeah, maybe Jehan can give us more insight.
Well, that's correct. I will speak from both sides. I know the situation in Turkey and I know the situation in United States. The problem with Turkey is that because of the constantly changed legislations and the definition of becoming a clinical embryologist and becoming a laboratory director in a clinical embryology setting, the possible candidates lost their enthusiasm because you cannot predict your future. That's the case in Turkey. Because they don't know if they can become a clinical embryologist, they'll be able to work after giving many years and training and getting those skill sets. So in Turkey, I think the major factor which is preventing buildup of new good quality clinical embryos is the uncertainty in the legislations. I am sure if there was a certain roadmap, there'll be enough embryologists like in Europe, and then there'll be no problems with that. In United States, we have a huge shortage, couple of things. The smaller centers are being bought by large, hedge funds. And there are certainly the big whales are forming in the institution, and the number of centers which is being opened is increasing. There's a huge demand. On average, there are 20-25 positions open all across the United States, almost monthly basis. And yes, I have personally experienced firsthand. For the last 8 years, I have been here. For the last 7 years, or 6 years, I can say that I found it very, very hard to hire people with sufficient skill set in the United States. And it's not going to be any easy going forward, because embryology is not easy. Embryology requires dedication. I myself worked over 22 years, 6.5 days a week. Myself, it was hard, it was very busy. I have worked in very busy clinical settings, and the expectation is always there. And if you feel responsible to your patients, half of your mind is always in the lab, although you leave the lab. This is the way it is. And the level of responsibility and the liability that you're carrying is intensive. And I can clearly remember the first 3 years of my IVF experience when I had my PhD and I stopped doing IVF later on. And I realized the first thing was you have to take your PhD lab cloth outside of that lab when you enter and become a technician to build your skill sets. And then I found my way like that. And I can clearly remember that I couldn't have proper sleep because I was having nightmares about the things that might happen in the lab. And this is not easy for anyone. So yes, creating a clinical embryologist is not easy, but the technological advantages coming in can easily bring better conditions to the embryologists, like time-lapse microscopy, witnessing systems, electronic medical record systems, which are kind of integrated with these time-lapse microscopy and witnessing systems, automated reportings, automated quality control, automated laboratory alarms, and things like that can make things easier. I see the future is bright, but obviously becoming an embryologist requires a lot of dedication and hard work.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I think we have
Okay,
some.
okay. We have a very good meeting, but the questions are not stopping. So we spent about 1.5 hours. So I want to thank on behalf of the Turkish Society of Clinical Embryology and Middle East Fertility Society for the presenters with their valuable thoughts and contributions. So thank you very much, and see you guys most probably in a meeting in our country or an international meeting. Thank you very much for each of you, and have a good practice in your home country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.